It's strange when you really pause and look at what's happening today. Countless men sit quietly in their own homes, absorbing waves of rage over events that happened years ago. They're being scolded for things they never did, apologising for thoughts that never crossed their mind, and somehow losing debates about their own lived experiences. And the moment a man finally whispers, "Enough," the world reacts as if a tragedy has occurred. People ask, where did all the good men disappear to? They didn't vanish. They stepped back. They unplugged from a system they realised was tilted against them. And the more men wake up to this reality, the faster that number grows. There's a simple experiment that reveals the whole structure. Next time you're being dragged into an argument, try to pinpoint what the argument is actually about. You won't be able to. It might start with dirty dishes, suddenly jump to her childhood, then ricochet to something you said 5 years ago, spiral into a critique of your tone, and somehow end with you apologising for emotions that aren't even yours. This isn't coincidence, and it isn't a random quirk of personality. It's deliberate patterning. Whether conscious or instinctual, the result is the same. Once you notice it, you can't unsee it. Most men assume a woman crying is simply overwhelmed. That anger means she's hurt. That confusion means she's struggling to articulate something. But if you step back, a pattern forms that's impossible to ignore. The tears show up precisely when you're making a solid point. The fury erupts the moment you expect accountability. The fog appears when a direct answer would incriminate her narrative. This isn't chaos, it's choreography. And it works because men are conditioned to treat female emotion as pure, authentic, sacred, never as a maneuver. I once worked with a man whose girlfriend dissolved into tears every time he brought up their finances. Bills, tears, budgeting, sobs, credit card questions, full meltdown. For 2 years, he couldn't get through a single financial conversation. By the time he finally realised what was happening, they were over $30,000 in debt, all while he felt guilty for upsetting her. What many men fail to understand is how skillfully the emotional battlefield can be arranged. She doesn't need clarity. Clarity exposes responsibility. She needs a haze, because confusion hands her the reins. So she floods the conversation with overlapping problems, old hurts, new accusations, half-remembered details, and exaggerated feelings until you're so lost you forget what the original issue even was. You think you're having a discussion. She's running a psychological assault with the appearance of communication. A friend of mine once recorded a dispute with his ex. When we listened back, she shifted subjects 14 times in under 20 minutes. 14. He tried to resolve each one, but before he finished any, she'd already leapt elsewhere. By the end, he was apologising. Neither of us could say for what. That wasn't a conversation. That was a strategic ambush. And beneath all of this lies a set of unwritten rules, myths, that quietly govern modern relationships. These ideas are never stated aloud, but they silently dictate the entire dynamic. Challenge them, and suddenly you're the villain. The first myth is the expectation that men should be mind readers. She believes you should know her needs without her saying a word, understand her mood without context, anticipate desires she never expressed. And if you fail to decipher these silent codes, you're labelled inattentive, careless, or emotionally incompetent. Imagine your employer firing you for not completing tasks they never told you existed. Ridiculous. Yet in relationships, this insanity is normalised. If you loved me, you would just know. No. If you loved me, you would communicate. The second myth is the supremacy of her emotional interpretation. Her feelings don't just matter, they become truth itself. If she feels disrespected, then you did disrespect her. If she feels unloved, then you don't love her. Intent is irrelevant. Facts are irrelevant. everything is reinterpreted through the lens of her emotional state. I once helped a man whose wife accused him of cheating solely because she felt like he was hiding something. No proof, no odd behaviour, nothing. Her intuition became the indictment, and he was expected to defend himself against a sensation in her stomach. And how do you prove innocence when the accusation has no evidence? Only emotion. You can't. That's the trap. The third myth is the double standard in emotional expression. She can scream, insult, slam doors, throw objects. This is called expressing herself. But the moment you raise your voice, even slightly, you're dangerous. You're abusive. You're unstable. One client had plates literally thrown at him. When he raised his voice telling her to stop, she called the police claiming she was scared. He was escorted out of his own home while she faced no consequences at all. She physically assaulted him, but his tone was the crime. This isn't an anomaly. This is the cultural script. Everywhere you look, society reinforces the same message. Female emotion is inherently valid and meaningful. Male emotion is threatening or manipulative. A woman says she's overwhelmed. Millions sympathize. A man admits he's overwhelmed. People mock him. Men are conditioned to mask their emotions while being expected to manage hers, and the result is catastrophic. Men enter relationships thinking they've found partnership, but instead they find themselves trapped in a maze of unwinnable expectations. If you challenge her feelings, you're cruel. If you accept them, you're guilty. If you try to negotiate, you're manipulative. Every route is a dead end. This is why so many men feel like they're losing themselves. Leaders become hesitant. Confident men become unsure. Solid, grounded men become emotional caretakers whose own needs never matter. They exist not as partners, but as buffers for someone else's storms. But once you see the mechanics, you stop being controlled by them. Recognizing that her emotional storms aren't sacred truth, but tactical weaponry, exposes the entire system. It doesn't mean you become cold, it means you stop surrendering your reality. And when you stop, her first reaction is fury, because you're breaking the spell. But if you hold your ground, one of two things happens. She respects the new boundary, or she reveals that control mattered more to her than connection ever did. In either case, the truth finally becomes visible, and truth, once seen, cannot be unseen. Every conversation turns into a battlefield. You spend your days tiptoeing through emotional landmines, filtering every sentence before it leaves your mouth. You measure tone, wording, timing, because a single misplaced phrase could ignite an explosion. You stop expressing yourself, not out of peace, but out of survival. At that point, you're not a partner anymore. You're a hostage tied to someone else's emotional volatility. I see the fallout constantly. Men who once carried themselves with certainty now question every instinct. Men who lead teams, run companies, and make critical decisions suddenly shrink inside their own homes. Guys who were once grounded and powerful have been reduced to emotional butlers, bending themselves into shapes that keep someone else stable, while their own needs are dismissed or punished. Real freedom begins the moment a man notices the pattern for what it is. When he finally sees that her emotional waves aren't pure expressions but strategic currents designed to pull control back to her side, the spell breaks. When he realizes the rules he's been following are nothing more than cultural myths dressed up as moral obligations, the entire landscape changes. Once you understand you're stuck in a rigged game, you gain the ability to step away from the table. This isn't about turning cold or heartless. It's about reclaiming your sense of self. When you stop treating her feelings as the ultimate authority, something predictable happens. She erupts. Fury becomes her first weapon, outrage that you dare to question her emotional universe. But if you remain steady, something deeper surfaces. Either she adapts and respects the boundary, or the mask slips and you see the truth. She valued domination more than connection. Either outcome gives you clarity, and clarity matters because this isn't a conversation about lying. People can detect lies. What's harder to detect are cultural delusions, ideas that have been repeated so often they feel like truths. The belief that a man's pain is insignificant, the belief that a woman's feelings define reality, the belief that disagreeing with a woman's emotion is abuse. These myths exist to maintain power imbalances that elevate one side and crush the other. Men are waking up to this en masse. They're watching their friends get destroyed in family courts. They're watching brothers get blindsided by false accusations. They see fathers ripped from their kids' lives. They see careers evaporate because someone felt uncomfortable. And men are doing the math like they always do. What's the upside? What exactly am I receiving in return? Because the deal men are offered today looks like this: give everything, expect nothing, provide endlessly, owe nothing, sacrifice constantly, receive no guarantees, handle her emotions but bury yours, be accountable for her happiness but never ask for reciprocity. And if one day she wakes up unhappy for any reason at all, prepare to lose half your assets and most of your access to your children. Young men see this clearly. They're watching their fathers drained, their brothers ruined, their friends trapped in dead relationships. So they're walking away, not out of failure, but out of rational analysis. They're choosing hobbies, work, creativity, friendships, anything over a system that offers risk without reward. Not because they're incapable of finding women, but because the cost-benefit calculation makes the decision obvious. The numbers tell the story. Marriages at all-time lows, birth rates collapsing, and entire generations of men abandoning dating altogether. Yet instead of examining the quality of what's offered, society asks what's wrong with men. The irony is astounding. And the way arguments unfold reveals even more. Watch carefully. Whenever you make a clear point based on logic, she pivots to tone. It's not what you said, it's how you said it. Suddenly you're no longer discussing reality. You're defending your emotional posture. She'll claim you're yelling even when your voice is flat. She'll accuse you of cruelty for stating facts. She'll insist your self-defense is an attack. The objective isn't resolution, it's derailment. The moment you start explaining your delivery, you've already lost the original argument. I watched this unfold with someone I know. His girlfriend wrecked his car. When he calmly asked about the insurance details, she collapsed into tears over how he was making her feel guilty. Within minutes he was comforting her about her wreck of his car. She never handled the insurance. He paid everything and apologized for being insensitive. This is how emotional supremacy works, and it gets worse with time. She can reinterpret the past according to her current mood. A beautiful vacation becomes terrible because she now feels unhappy. A thoughtful gift becomes insulting because she feels neglected today. Your shared history becomes a hostage to her present emotional state. One man's ex-wife claimed their entire decade of marriage was abusive, based not on actions but on retroactive feelings. Working long hours, emotional abandonment, wanting a prenup, financial abuse, asking her to contribute, controlling. The courts took her emotional reframing as evidence. This process begins early. She starts with small tests, subtle manipulations, minor guilt trips. If you allow them, they grow. If you resist, she shifts tactics. It's gradual conditioning meant to stretch your tolerance until you don't recognize yourself. And by the time you do, your entire emotional life belongs to her. Meanwhile, your own feelings fade into irrelevance. In the beginning, she pretends to care. With time, your bad day becomes an inconvenience. Your stress becomes a flaw. Your fatigue becomes negativity. Her emotions remain sacred, yours become a burden. But here's the plot twist. Men are discovering they simply don't need this. They've spent decades believing relationships were the key to fulfillment. Then they stepped into them and found constant criticism, exhaustion, and emotional depletion. They step out and find peace, quiet, stability, time, money, growth. One client put it perfectly. I wasted a decade trying to make her happy and lost myself. 2 years focusing on myself and I feel alive. He has savings now because no one is draining his bank account. He has calm because no one is stirring chaos in his home. He has hours of his life back because no one is demanding constant attention. His energy returns because there's no one siphoning it for emotional maintenance. He's not against women, he's simply in favour of his own well-being. The liberation men feel when they finally step away is almost addictive. No more senseless fights that erupt out of nowhere. No more apologising just for existing. No more being appointed the full-time manager of someone else's emotional weather. No more being wrong by default. No more pouring everything into someone who can never be satisfied. What remains is space. Space for peace, progress, and real joy. And what surprises most men is that anger rarely drives them out. It's fatigue, pure exhaustion. They hit a point where the next fight isn't worth addressing, the next accusation isn't worth disproving, the next emotional demand isn't worth meeting. They don't slam the door behind them, they quietly walk away because the weight became too heavy. The opposite of love isn't hatred, it's no longer caring. I recognise this look in men every day. Their eyes aren't filled with resentment, they're empty from carrying too much for too long. They tried the whole list: more communication, more therapy, more patience, more generosity, more self-sacrifice. None of it mattered. Because the structure isn't built to succeed, it's designed to extract. It takes and takes and takes until a man has nothing left. So they withdraw strategically, not emotionally, logically. If a business loses money non-stop, you shut it down. If an investment never yields profit, you sell it. If a game is rigged, you stop playing. Men are applying the same reasoning to relationships, and the conclusions are unavoidable. The fog starts to clear, and what appears is harsh but honest. And when they dare to speak about this, the backlash is predictable to the point of comedy. You're bitter. Someone hurt you. You'll end up alone. You're missing out. But missing out on what exactly? Funding someone's lifestyle, enduring endless criticism, living on the edge of false allegations, walking on emotional eggshells every day. Men are realizing that modern relationships operate like casinos, rigged with precision. Yes, a rare man might hit the jackpot, but the odds overwhelmingly tilt toward loss. And the longer you play, the more inevitable the collapse becomes. The shame tactics that once worked so well are losing their power. Labels like incel, commitment phobic, immature, or selfish fall flat now. These were tools to shame men back into bad deals. But when the alternative is personal destruction, shame becomes irrelevant. The dating world exposes the truth in plain sight. Women ask where the good men disappeared to while refusing to recognise why men left in the first place. Standards shoot into the stratosphere while what they offer plummets. Expectations grow, reciprocity shrinks, and then they're shocked when men step away. A woman once told me she was upset that men only wanted casual connections. I asked her what she brought to the table that made long-term commitment worth the risk. She found the question offensive, but if you remove sex from the equation, what's left? Friendship. Men already have friends. Emotional support. Men support each other. Household contribution. Men can outsource that. The things that once made relationships meaningful, family, shared purpose, growth, are often absent in modern dynamics. Instead, men are handed criticism, emotional labour, financial risk, and a list of obligations with no benefits attached. The old rewards vanished, but the old responsibilities remained. The contract was rewritten, and men were expected not to notice. But they have noticed, and they're dismantling the myths that kept them locked in place. The myth that a relationship makes you whole, the myth that solitude equals loneliness, the myth that a man's worth depends on female approval, the myth that sacrifice is the ultimate expression of love. Once those illusions shatter, freedom rushes in. Men who've stepped out for a while talk like men waking from a coma. They can't believe the things they tolerated, the identity they abandoned, the self they lost. Once the haze of emotional manipulation lifts, the contrast is undeniable. Growth accelerates when a man stops spending his resources on managing someone else's inner world. He suddenly has energy for his ambitions, money for his goals, time for his interests, and tranquility to rebuild himself. He rediscovers who he is, not the version he molded himself into for survival inside the relationship. One man dropped 40 pounds, rebuilt his career, travelled the globe, reconnected with friends. He told me, "I didn't realise how tiny my life had become while trying to squeeze myself into hers." He's not against relationships. He's against relationships that shrink him. He's pro-growth. And the relationships he left behind were anti-growth. This is why emotional independence feels revolutionary to men. They discover they don't need someone else's approval to feel worthy. They don't need someone else's permission to pursue happiness. They don't need someone else's emotional state to define their identity. What they called love was often dependency, and dependency feels like withdrawal when you break it. But push through the withdrawal and what comes next is freedom. Freedom to think authentically, to feel without being policed, to live without being drained. And the reaction from women when men check out is revealing. There's no introspection, no accountability, no re-evaluation of what's being offered. Instead, there's anger, outrage that men no longer accept unfair deals, attempts to shame them back into compliance, rage that emotional manipulation has lost its potency. But that only works on men who still care about approval, and more men every day simply don't. Their meaning comes from purpose, their validation comes from progress, their worth comes from what they create, not what someone demands. The leverage is gone because the need is gone, and the consequences of this shift are seismic. Falling birth rates, marriage becoming irrelevant, women baffled by a vanishing male presence, men building lives, futures and communities that don't revolve around romantic involvement. The traditional gender contract is dissolving because one side stopped honouring it while expecting the other side to remain loyal. Some women are beginning to notice the shift. They see men stepping back in massive numbers and are finally asking real questions, questions that actually matter. What do we bring to the table that makes commitment worthwhile? How do we offer value equal to the risks men face? What needs to change if we want men to return? Those voices exist, but they're drowned out by others demanding even more while giving even less. The truth is simple. The men who left aren't necessarily gone forever. Present them with a different arrangement, one rooted in genuine partnership instead of emotional servitude, and many would revisit the idea. Give them peace instead of chaos, support instead of pressure, reciprocity instead of extraction. But until the deal itself changes, men will continue walking away. Individually, the solution is straightforward. Protect your sanity. Spot emotional manipulation as soon as it starts. Refuse frameworks that only benefit one side. Reject any dynamic where your needs are optional. If reciprocity doesn't exist, you leave. No guilt, no apology. Your joy matters. Your inner calm matters. Your future matters. Anyone who shames you for prioritizing those things is revealing exactly why you should distance yourself. Collectively, however, the fix requires honesty. The agreement between men and women changed without warning. The rewards decreased, the expectations increased, the liabilities multiplied, and the consequences became catastrophic. Men aren't failing to commit. They're succeeding at evaluating risk. They aren't scared of love. They're terrified of what the institution has evolved into. Every man needs to internalize this. Walking away from a broken system isn't cowardice. Rejecting a lopsided contract isn't selfishness. Choosing peace isn't weakness. It's self-preservation. You're not malfunctioning for noticing the dysfunction. You're finally seeing clearly. The culture that insists you're incomplete without a partner is lying. The narrative that says your worth depends on sacrifice is conditioning. The idea that male suffering is noble while female discomfort is oppression is psychological manipulation. Once you understand this, rejecting the script becomes easy. Men aren't choosing themselves because they hate women. They're choosing themselves because no one else will. They're prioritizing their mental health over someone else's emotional volatility, their ambitions over someone's entitlement, their life over someone's expectations. And that terrifies a system designed around male self-sacrifice. People keep asking, why are men giving up on women? The real question is, why did it take decades for men to admit the truth? The contract has been unfair for a long time. The dangers have been obvious for years. The manipulation has been part of the culture forever. Men aren't suddenly awakening. They're finally vocalizing what they internalized long ago. The shame of leaving is nothing compared to the humiliation of staying in something that erodes your soul. The loneliness of being single is nothing compared to the emptiness of being with someone who doesn't appreciate you. The fear of being alone is nothing compared to the fear of false accusations, financial devastation, or emotional destruction. Modern men are acting rationally. They're evaluating the terms offered, seeing the risks, noticing the lack of reward, and making the only logical decision. This isn't emotional immaturity, it's strategic intelligence. The only shocking part is that anyone finds it shocking. People attempt to reframe this as fear or weakness, but that's projection. It takes incredible strength to abandon lifelong conditioning, courage to challenge societal expectations, clarity to recognize a bad deal, and wisdom to choose serenity over chaos. Men aren't retreating. They're forging a new path. What's happening is the first widespread male refusal to participate in a social arrangement that exploits them. For generations, men accepted the deal because they had no alternative. Now they do. Modern men can live fulfilled lives without marriage, without a partner, without traditional roles. They can be complete on their own terms. That loss of leverage is causing panic, especially among those who depended on men never questioning the arrangement. So what happens when men stop playing along? When they stop providing, stop self-sacrificing, stop absorbing blame, stop seeking female approval? A system built on male labour and emotional compliance begins to fall apart. But here's the twist. That collapse becomes liberation for individual men. You're not obligated to participate in a system that harms you. You don't have to tolerate emotional exploitation. You don't have to sacrifice your happiness for someone else's comfort. You can simply walk away, and walking away is not losing. Walking away is winning. Men who detach aren't angry. They're awake. They aren't broken. They're finally whole. They've realized something revolutionary. They don't need what they were told they needed. They can be content alone, fulfilled without validation, grounded without approval. The real red pill has nothing to do with decoding women. It's about understanding yourself. Your worth doesn't depend on female acceptance. Your value doesn't come from romantic success. Your happiness doesn't rely on anyone else's emotional state. You're enough as you are. So why are so many men done with women? because life without the constant chaos is better, because peace is better than pressure, because freedom is better than judgment, because fulfillment is better than criticism. They're not falling behind, they're finally stepping forward. Men, I want to hear your stories. When did you check out? What moment made you realise the cost wasn't worth the reward? Share your experiences below. This moment matters. This shift is historic. And make no mistake, the problem isn't men walking away. The problem is what they're walking away from.